Hi, Matt.
There we are. Hey.
Sorry, I was just finishing a previous call. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
I can hear you're waking up.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Okay, let me share my cam. Yeah.
that's just the nature of things these days, actually.
Yeah. Oh, my youngest son has been coughing last night.
Oh no.
And I had to take him and go downstairs in the sofa and try to put him in a more vertical stand. And I missed my holidays last week.
Yeah. Hope everything's
So
okay.
today I proposed to my student Alice. Yeah, Alice has come. Hi, Alice.
Hi.
Okay, so Matt, Alice is a student of ours who's been working on Eclipse Che.
Oh, cool.
And so as we were discussing Che and stuff half an hour ago, I proposed she join us. And so I don't know. She's there. Alice, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Alice, and I'm looking into integrating an IDE into Antidote.
Very cool. Well, thanks for joining. And nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So Matt, Alice, have you watched the previous the recordings of previous meetings?
I have watched a few, but not all of them.
Okay. So otherwise you can see Matt's face in the podcast. Or
One of these days I'll wake up earlier so I can actually show my face.
Yeah, it's 8 a.m. in your place.
Yeah, which isn't all that early. It's on the early side for me, but it's not that bad. The main reason is lately I've been up a little too late.
At least two. I can't reveal when she woke up this morning, but it was a bit late too. So I guess after the introductions, we can proceed with the regular.
Yeah, and I've told Olivia this. If you as you proceed down the path of prototyping and whatnot, if you run into any issues with what we have set up, just reach out. You know, the forums are, obviously you can join the stand-up anytime you want, but the forums at discuss.nrelabs.io are it's a way to reach me, any time of the week. So feel free to post there if you have any issues. I'm happy to respond there.
Okay.
And yeah, thank you for looking at this. I think it's cool. In fact, I've actually I told Olivia this. Having an editor in the project has been something that I've wanted to have for a long time. So I'm really glad somebody's looking at it.
Alice, I think you have a lot of noise in your background, so you may mute if you don't have to speak. Or it's at Matt. I don't know.
Alrighty. So not a ton to share. One big thing that I know I haven't shared yet that I'll tease, but for now, let's just keep it simple. The 0.6.0 release, as well as the new curriculum release for being that's compatible with the new Antidote release. Both are released actually. They're both out. Neither of them are in production. I'm currently trying to coordinate with one of our sponsors who has a blog post that's pointing to some of the older links. the URLs are changing a little bit because of the move to a lesson slug as opposed to a lesson ID. So I wanted to make sure they had a chance to update their blog post before I, broke everything basically. It's sort of a soft break because if you do try to go to an older URL, then it'll still redirect you to the new site. And if you go to a URL that was published like in the last 2 months, it'll tell you, hey, this lesson ID is no longer in use. Go to the lesson catalog to find your lesson, and that way you can find it that way. So it's not a huge deal, but I'm just taking the time to make sure we break as few things as possible. So I expect that most of that's going to get ironed out today, and we'll probably go live with both tomorrow on the main site. But in the meantime, the software is out. So if you wanted to use the new CLI or something like that, or use the Self-Medicate, for instance, has the new version. I pinned to the new version last night. So all that's been updated. So if you're not interested in what's going live on the production NRELabs.io site, then that's still probably useful for you. But I just want to give a heads up. Both of those releases are out, and I'm going to be spending the next day just making sure everything's tested properly and pushing it to production. The last thing. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
So in terms of Self-Medicate, we've been able to test a bit, even though there are problems. Like Alice tested, and it was a kind of a guru meditation message for VirtualBox, which is strange, but nevertheless, I've been able to, and she also has been able to launch it with libvirt, so that gives hope. What about the more Docker-based Docker Compose or Make Hack variant? Have you been able to trace the documentation or not yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
There's a bunch of things you could do with that. The officially supported version of Self-Medicate is going to be the VirtualBox version, just because it's the most compatible with everybody.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to, and I've done this before myself, you can launch the Self-Medicate script directly on Linux. It runs with the driver equals none parameter, and that doesn't use a VM. That just uses it just uses Docker.
Mm-hmm.
So that's an option.
Yeah, but I was more thinking about the kind of make hack scenario that was more on the antidote.web repo.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, that's still around. Yeah, that's still around. If you go into the antidote.web repo, there is still a Docker Compose file in there, and I even updated it. It's actually updated for the most recent version. I used that to work on 0.6.0.
Okay, so you've been touching it recently?
Yes. Yeah.
I should give it a try again.
It's the same command too. It's make hack. The difference is that it's not running the syringe mock thing that was running before. What it's running instead is, and this is not by default because it's commented out, but you can uncomment that section of the Docker file.
Yeah, so you have to touch it a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Here, let me bring it up myself. Compose. So yeah, by default, it just assumes that you just want to work on antidote web, so it'll build a container for you and launch it like this. But if you wanted to run antidote core so you can have an API to work against, you can uncomment this section. And I assume this is what you were talking about earlier. I have not documented this. This will be part of. But
do we need the nuts server part?
You do, yes, yeah, that's required. Okay. Yeah, but that's easy. You just include it. That's all you need to do.
Okay, so nuts is a part of the pod, the A-core pod, is it?
In a Kubernetes deployment, it is, yes. But this is just a regular container.
Okay, because I've been looking at the contents of Self-Medicate, and there you have Jaeger, I don't know how to pronounce.
Yep.
But I couldn't see nuts, but nuts is inside one of the containers of the pod. Okay, so I see.
Yep. In the self-medicate deployment, there's a bunch of stuff. There's the Nats server as well as Jaeger alongside the A core pod, and then you might have been referring to the actual Jaeger deployment in self-medicate, so that actually runs Jaeger itself. The Jaeger container that's running alongside Antidote core is the agent. It's just for collecting spans. Again, this is all. I mean, mostly that part doesn't matter as much. Uh, as long as everything's working properly, of course. If things aren't working, then you do need to have access to Jaeger. So I'll go through once I've finished with my current strain of work. I actually have been working a lot on updating the documentation. I just haven't gotten to this part. Mostly what I've been focusing on are the new
that's why I'm harassing you again and again.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to let you know where I'm at. So I mostly just working at the moment. My main focus is on improving the curriculum contribution pipeline because it's in dire need of fixes. Part of that is updating on the thing that I was about to talk about, which is the new preview service. And so I've been sort of going from top to bottom. I've worked mostly on updating this section here, a little bit in here. And then once I'm finished with that, I'm going to turn my attention to this. This has gotten some updates. So like if you look at the Antidote CLI, you can see that I've updated that with installation instructions. So that's good. But there's a lot that I still need to touch, especially the object reference and then development, which is the part we're talking about here. I'm probably going to get to that last because it's at the bottom. So that's why that's.
Or maybe I can give my contributions with a few PR.
Yeah, if you'd like. It's all new stuff, so I wasn't expecting that anybody would know how it works.
It's probably better if you refactor the whole thing that I don't mess with it for a moment.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, in self-medicate, or rather in Antidote Web, this is a thing. You just uncomment this section if you want to have the Antidote Core API. You can also uncomment this. These are just regular old Docker containers for running endpoints if you wish. You'll still have to populate Antidote Core with the right data via anti-CTL as is referenced here. Again, I'm going to document that. But that's the idea. So the idea is instead of the whole
already in the previous recording. So
yeah, instead of the old syringe mock model where there were sort of baked in live lesson, basically the data that was provided via the API was like baked into the binary. This model is different. This allows you to run the real Antidote core just without the scheduler aspect. So you don't need to. It doesn't integrate with Kubernetes at all. It just runs the API. And you can populate the API yourself with your own data using the anti-CTL tool. That's the idea. Cool. So I'll get to that. That's on my list.
Nice.
Last thing. This may not be interesting to the two of you, but I figured it'd be interesting to other people, so I'll share it here. And again, this is very early, so this is one of the things that I'm actively working on right now. For a while, and I've mentioned this before, so this shouldn't be a surprise. Self-medicate is a great tool for obviously running a local instance or doing some basic feature development if you want to use that. There's a bunch of reasons why self-medicate is useful. And for many of those reasons, it's going to stick around. So this isn't a replacement for self-medicate. It's effectively I've wanted to add additional options for specific use cases for people who just want to add a little bit of content and don't want to mess with their any hypervisors on their laptop. They just want to add content and see how it works. There are a lot of people out there that are like that. They don't have time to mess with the local environment. And what I've wanted to do for a long time is add a service that allows them to see a preview of their changes on just a regular site that we host. So instead of forcing them to run the local preview using self-medicate or a tool like that, I can just generate a subdomain off of the main NRE Labs site and preview it for them there. I wanted to do that for a long time, and I haven't had the time to look at building a service that does this until recently. So I've spent the last week building out a proof of concept for this. And you can kind of see this if you go to one of the pull requests that I've been working on lately. I don't think I've updated this one since, so probably the only one that has this at the moment is this pull request. So this is a new lesson that focuses on CRPD, which is a routing stack. As well as an image that comes with it. Mostly this is work in progress, so this isn't really final, but I'm using this as a way of testing the new preview service. Whenever you add a commit, let me actually go out to the main part of the repo, and I'll show you the new CI pipeline because I've improved that as well. So if you go to the .travis.yml file, you'll see that there's a few things that are being run every time you make a push to the NRE Labs curriculum. So like if you open a PR, this is what happens. The very first thing is it's actually downloading the current version of the antidote tool. So you can see the 0.6.0 and all of the binaries are there. It extracts it. And then it runs the command antidote validate on the current directory. So it validates that the curriculum it validates against the current models. So this is a really basic check just to make sure that the metadata is compatible and everything else is compatible from like a file perspective. It doesn't catch everything, but it catches a lot of the basics. And this runs first because again, we don't want to we don't want to merge any pull requests into the curriculum that don't have the sort of they don't pass this sanity check. So this is a really basic test. The next thing is a script that checks that you've updated the change log. That's been in there for a long time. It's just to make sure that we try, we have an understanding of what's changed without forcing people to use git blame. And then the new thing, the thing that I've been working on and that I've added is a step after success. So after all of this has passed, so the idea is that all of the basic sanity check stuff has passed. After that, what we'll do is we will run this shell script that requests a preview of the current branch. So basically, anytime you open a PR, whatever your branch is, whatever your source repository is, what we're going to do is we're going to build a preview based off of that. So we're actually going to check out your code in our cluster and run a new program that I built, like I said, over the last week, that launches a preview site, a fully blown NRE Labs version of the NRE Labs site, but pointed at your branch instead of the current released curriculum. And the idea is that you can see a preview of that. Now the workflow is you open a PR, and as long as those first few checks, like I said, the basic sanity checks and the changelog stuff, and then anything else we add, we've talked about adding other things in the past. So as long as whatever is there, as long as that all checks out, then you will then the preview service will receive that webhook and will generate a preview for you. If it's successful, it'll show this comment here where it says from the NRE Labs preview bot, it says I've constructed a preview of your change and it's available here. Now this was 14 hours ago, so this actually won't be live anymore. So this won't work, but you can see the comment that's here. It'll say commit. So the commit is the commit that you most recently did. That way it's up to date. I'm also extracting logs from the infrastructure. So as the bot spins up basically a new full-blown version, what it's actually doing, to be honest, is it's kind of doing the same thing Self-Medicate's doing, but just in our production cluster. So it's creating a new version of Antidote Core, a new version of Antidote Web. It's deploying it all programmatically. So it's actually pretty cool if I'm being honest. And actually, I can do this real quick. Let me generate a quick commit. If I go to NRE Labs curriculum, let's just do git commit amend save, and
we know the passphrase.
yeah, origins that. So there we go. Oh crap, I keep doing this. I'm actually working on a different remote. Let me just delete this real quick. Sorry.
You haven't recorded the remote part of the Git Labs and Latte? No, is it?
No, I haven't, but that will come soon. Actually, tomorrow is when that lesson. Tomorrow is when that will go out. So I'll be recording that very soon after.
We have a new participant, Matt.
Oh, hello. Hello, nice to meet you.
Hey, same here. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you mind taking a second to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Manjunath. I'm a consultant working for one of the data center companies around storage networking and the compute-based storage. Yeah, that's pretty much. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, no worries. And that's, if you want to be a fly on the wall, that's totally fine. Just let us know if there's anything we can do to help.
Yeah, sure. Well, this is my first meeting, so probably I'll just be a silent viewer here.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, basically this is the new preview service, and if I go to pull requests, I just push the new branch. So let me try to reopen a pull request here, and CRPD. Actually, if I go to I think if I go to here, it'll be easier. Yeah, that should work.
Alice, this is your crash course in GitHub for fun and profit.
And I'll give you a little bit of inside baseball. Here are the logs. So right now what's happening is those first few steps that are running on the CI pipeline are running. So it's doing some basic validation. Oh, looks like we failed in the push. Oh, wow. That's interesting. All right. Well, anyway, you get the point.
So you have to record a proper demonstration.
Yeah, for sure. I actually believe that's a Travis failure of some kind. So I'll have to figure that out. But the preview service, if you look at the comment, that's sort of the user experience that you'll get. I'm still working on this. Just FYI, this is still very. I wouldn't even consider it beta. It's still alpha. So. But the experience is like that. I mean, basically, I'd like to get to the point where you can just simply click this link and you'll get an automated preview, which works, by the way. I actually have tested that part. Like I said, I'm pretty sure this is a Travis failure of some kind, but this actually does work. I've already worked on the new Git lesson using this mechanism, so it works pretty well.
So it would be much faster than running self-medicate.
Yeah, exactly.
To download images and wait.
Oh my goodness, yes. Well, especially considering for many reasons, the images. There's actually a few reasons why I've done this. The user experience, I think, is a lot easier than self-medicate for one thing. Especially if you don't need self-medicate. Self-medicate will stay around for people that need it, but it's going to be what I'm going to be doing is preferring that people who just want to add content to the curriculum, that they use this mechanism primarily. So self-medicate's sort of there if you need it, and if you need it, I'm taking the position that you kind of know what you're doing and you're willing to take on the additional complexity. That's kind of my position there. But yeah, for sure, there are other benefits as well as related to downloading images. Of course, this is all our cluster's running in a production data center, which has a much better internet connection, much more reliable internet connection. So that's obviously going to be faster. There's also images that we are incorporating that. Like for instance, some vendors are contributing images that they don't want to make public. There's commercial software that that isn't open source that they want to give people access to through NRE Labs, but they don't want to allow people to automatically download it for free anonymously. You know what I mean? There are some legal reasons why that's the case. Actually, some export and cryptography and things like that.
In terms of connectivity, is it still cut from the net where it runs?
I'm not getting that. Sorry. Can you say that again?
Sorry. When you run labs on the production site, the labs are sandboxed. They don't have access to downloading stuff.
Yeah, correct.
So is it the same for this preview
It is. It is. Yeah.
platform? Okay. So
Yep.
you have to pre-provision what is needed for images and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and that's another aspect that I've been working on is when you contribute to the NRE Labs curriculum. I'm starting to think that images need to be treated differently or separately rather from lessons. So if a new image is needed, I'm thinking that needs to be its own effort. And so the idea is that when you contribute a lesson, you'll be using images that already exist. So if you have a lesson in mind that needs a new piece of software, let's tackle that first and let's get that software right. And that also implies that we have tests for testing new images that we bring in, which is something that I want to do as well. But yeah, that's the idea.
Including a review of the copyright and stuff.
Yep, exactly. So there will be a process for that. The main reason for that is, again, there are people who have approached me and they're like, look, I'd love to contribute my image to the NRE Labs curriculum, but I don't want to allow people to just anonymously download it. That's actually illegal in many cases. So I've needed to provide them with a new option. I think this does a pretty good job of that. What this model allows us to do is it allows us to have an option for people that are facing those kind of restrictions.
So you have a labs as a service.
Yeah, sure. So yeah. We'll see where it goes. Still working on it. Like I said, I'm probably going to be working on it throughout the next week. Maybe next week I'll be able to give a working demo with all the Travis issues sorted out. That's been challenging. Travis has a number of environment variables that are very similar to each other, and sometimes you pick the wrong one. And it's been a journey, but I think I'm starting to get most of the wrinkles ironed out. Like I said, I've already been using this to work on content myself, which is the kind of sweet spot I want to get to, because I want to dog food this for sure. But that's it. That's it for now. Anybody else have anything else?
Or maybe we can take advantage of Alice's presence to say some bits about Eclipse Che, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Alice, do you mind if I'm speaking, or you want to? I don't know if you're prepared to do some speech about what you've been looking at. We didn't prepare that, so maybe it's a bit hard for you. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure what to present about Eclipse Chi. And also I have a lot of noise because my dad is playing.
Yeah, the problem of confinement in a shared space. Okay, so probably my kids are quiet now, so I can probably describe a bit what we've been testing. So as you know, Matt, but for Manjunat maybe, and others for the recording, we've been looking for ways to integrate Eclipse Che to provide some kind of IDE feature to the labs, allowing to edit files with syntax colorization, but all the features that you need when you're programming. So it may not be useful for most labs because most labs just involve editing a few YAML files and stuff. But there may be people wanting to edit Python code or other.
Well, I just want to say the main reason that we don't do that in most labs is because we don't have this kind of feature. So
yeah, because VI is feasible, but it's not really
exactly.
Or Nano.
I would expect that having a better option will unlock more content types. In fact, I would expect that if I have time to do this, which I'm hoping to, once a feature like this is in place, we could refactor the existing curriculum to really take advantage of it.
Yeah. So the idea is, to dog food somehow, or drinking our own champagne, as we say in France. And we would prefer to be able to develop new contents for the curriculum from inside the labs themselves. So what you showed us for the preview is interesting, and the missing part maybe the IDE. So Eclipse Che basically comes in two flavors. There is one part that we obviously miss is the editor, a web editor. So you have something which is very close to Visual Studio Code or Atom or other editors which are actually running as a web application packaged with Electron. So even though it runs on the desktop, it's actually a web application written with Node.js technology, so which can be integrated in a lab. So that would be an option to include an editor in a lab, in an image, so that at some point in the lesson you can edit files. So that's the, I would say, the easier part probably, which is single user Eclipse Che.
Cool.
Actually, it's Eclipse Theia, Theia.
What's the difference? What's Che?
So Che is the next option, which is multi-user. So basically, it's a platform where you host your developments. It's like software, SaaS, a platform as a service environment for development.
Okay.
So it includes an authentication facility, which is called Key. Oh, Alice, you have to help me.
Keycloak.
Keycloak, yeah. Which uses a database or an LDAP of some kind to authenticate users. Then it manages workspaces where a developer will find her own projects, checked out and run continuous integration and stuff. And in the end, a web IDE to edit code in those workspaces. So this is the part of Eclipse Che that resembles a lot Antidote, because in Antidote we have many labs for many people. And in Eclipse Che, you have many workspaces for many developers. So one difference is that by definition in Eclipse Che, you authenticate people that are working on the platform, which is a feature that we may miss for particular deployments of Antidote, like academic deployments, which is my particular interest. So what we've been looking at is if it's feasible to integrate Eclipse Che and Antidote on the same Kubernetes cluster, so that we have a possibility to add authentication, editing some files, which could be part of lab, where we run an application or we run a particular set of pods or containers. So that's not really obvious because the documentation is not really clear on what you need, what are the constraints. There are multiple setup scenarios for OpenShift, for Kubernetes on Amazon, for Kind, for stuff like that. So we have to figure out what is strictly necessary, how to deploy it inside Self-Medicate, for instance. And that's what we're busy at, more or less.
Very cool. Have you thought about maybe just doing, like, because it sounds like Theia is a lot less opinionated on what it needs. So like if we could treat, like I'm kind of thinking of Theia as similar to the way that we treat Jupyter notebooks today, where
exactly. Oh, by the way, it looks like Eclipse Che, the full platform, can also run Jupyter notebooks as an alternative to Theia.
Wow.
Yeah, I would say it's the easiest part. Just integrating Theia as a web application. It's a Node.js TypeScript application, and integrate that in an image, and that's it. More or less.
Just in terms of like the path of least resistance, I'm not levying an opinion on which way we should go, but I'm just spitballing here. The idea of spinning up something like that based on what the lesson needs is again something we've already been doing with the Jupyter notebooks. And so what we probably could do is have change add a field or something like that to the lesson metadata that says, hey, does this lesson need an editor of some kind? Yes or no. It's a Boolean flag, right? And if it's true, it'll spin it up just like it does with the Jupyter notebook today. So we would need to do that. We would also need to change antidote core to probably spin up a scratch volume of some kind that all of the pods can share instead of having each pod have its own local directory.
Yeah.
That way
But
you don't need it.
That's where we kind of come close to the full Eclipse Che, you know, because if Eclipse Che has a service that deploys on-demand workspaces, which are basically backed up volumes between sessions, we could just integrate that into Antidote and that's it.
Okay.
Somehow. So
yeah, I would love to see more information on that. My main concern with the full Che is just how it sounds like it does all the things, which sounds cool, but if it's too bloated, then it might be more trouble than it's worth. So I think it'll come down to a trade-off of like what we're getting from that versus what we have to have incorporated from that. Like if we have to run the whole kitchen sink just to get that, it might be worth going with the simpler option. But I'm not trying to make a decision now. I think like I said, I think the next step is to get a good design doc together that outlines the options and maybe talks about a little bit of the, okay, if we go this option, then we've got to do these things. And if we go down this option, then we've got to do these things. That's the kind of thing I think would be a good next step.
But I guess now that Self-Medicate runs the latest, and now that I kind of know how to better test integration of endpoints in an image and stuff like that, we can proceed with the easiest, I don't know how you described it, the least resistance.
Path of least resistance,
path of least resistance. And while Alice or me, we have a longer term experiment in trying to understand what are the requirements for the full Eclipse Che and so on.
Sure. As always, just let me know if there's anything I can do to unblock you.
I'm harassing you during the weekly stand-ups, and I guess it's good so far. Alice, do you want to add something I forgot?
Yeah, I was thinking about how Eclipse Che handled the persistency of the data of the code. So I was as you Matt, as you said before, there was one way of doing this would be to so I don't really understand what it implies, but you said that it would be to modify antidote core to create a volume to be shared.
I can add some clarity there. Basically, when in Antidote, when a lesson is spun up, each of the endpoints that run in the lesson, so pieces of software like a network device or a container that runs a particular Python library, whatever it is, each of those pods gets its own file system, but there's no file system that's shared amongst them. And I think it would be a really good idea if we do have an editor integration like Theia or the full-blown Che, whatever it is. It'd be a really good idea to just have one copy, one instance of an editor that has access to all of the files across the board in that lesson, as opposed to just the files within a single endpoint, right? And so the idea is that on all of the endpoints, we would map a shared directory of some kind that they all have access to. And then the editor would also have access to change files there.
So everyone would have access to other users' code?
Not other users. No, not other users. It would still be within the Kubernetes namespace. So every lesson is launched.
Okay.
Every lesson is launched within its own Kubernetes namespace, and so that would still be the boundary. But within the namespace, because that namespace is specific to not even just one user, it's actually specific to one what we call live lesson, which is an instance of a lesson definition that's running. So within a live lesson namespace, then we can have access across the board because that's just still for the same user, same session really.
Yeah, okay. Because what I saw in Ipsoche is that they create for each workspace they create. For example, if one user creates a workspace, then there is a new namespace created for this user, and there are persistent Kubernetes persistent volumes created also for this workspace. So there is a persistent volume for each workspace.
Interesting.
But I don't know how this can work with Antidote.
Yeah, I imagine it would be. I imagine if we did go with the full-blown Che installation, there would be some sort of API that we could interact with. So we would have Antidote Core maybe call that API to say, "Hey, I need a new workspace for the whole lesson," and then all of the all of the trick I think will be allowing the pods that run within the live lesson namespace, ensuring that they have access to that workspace. Because it's not going to be enough to just be able to change files using the editor. The software that's running within each of the endpoints for the lesson needs to be able to access those changes as well. Needs to be able to access those files so that you can edit a file in one tab and then maybe run a script that you edited in another tab.
Yeah.
That's what we have to understand in the architecture of Che, because when you deploy Che on OpenShift, for instance, or on AWS, they rely on the existence of a service that only provides those persistent volumes to the pods, to the namespaces, which is different. But I'm not sure because I haven't really looked at OpenShift or AWS or those variants of Kubernetes.
Yeah.
So my tests so far were to investigate what happens with Kind, because with Kind you're on your own and it's more similar to what we are using in Antidote, as far as I understand.
Okay. Yeah, got it. Like I said, this all sounds super cool. I think the next step for us is to get a design doc together and start talking through some of the options. So, I'll let you guys and gals figure that out. And it sounds like you guys are off on the right path. Again, I'm here to help. Just let me know if I can unblock you or anything. And if we get to the point where we have a good design doc for discussion, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But it sounds cool. I appreciate you guys looking at this.
I'm quite excited, and even though it's not easy for Alice maybe to work on confinement versus the traditional mood of students in the school, but still, maybe it's an opportunity also for her to make good progress because she's bored at home. I don't know. No, I'm joking, and it's recorded.
Yeah.
Besides that, maybe I wanted to just mention a few words about internationalization, because we discussed that in the last meeting.
Sure, yeah.
And I had a look at what's in place. So basically what I saw, and it wasn't obvious last time, but I didn't figure out, is that the translation only applies to the parts which are dynamic to the JS code. But if we think about an internationalized platform deployment, it would require also maybe the contents of the static HTML and CSS maybe pages. So most of what the user perceives is actually static at the moment.
What
It's
do you mean by
generated from Jinja templates.
Oh, in Antidote Web, you're saying?
Yeah, in Antidote Web, yeah.
And that's not presented to the user, though.
Sorry?
That's not none of that's presented to the user. The only thing that's presented to the user is what makes it into the internationalization strings.
Yeah, but like if you look at the page of the main, the homepage of the labs,
Mm-hmm.
the platform. It's let me see what's inside. So find lesson content, for instance, this button, maybe it's dynamic. So the string find lesson content can be translated, but automation unshackled, this isn't.
Okay, so the exercise there is then if there is a piece of content that is not in an internationalization string but should, that's easy to fix. We can find those and identify them and fix them even without adding additional languages. We can do that. In fact, I did that a few times for things in the 0.6.0 release. I identified a few things that were baked into the HTML code that were not in an internationalization string.
So basically, at the moment, it's a static website, right? There's no PHP, no Node.js that constructs the pages. Pages are mostly static.
The structure is, yeah.
Yeah, those pages, not the content of the lab, of course.
Of course, yeah. That's all dynamic because that's all done behind the scenes. But
Yeah.
The front end is.
It's not the Nginx that serves the error I had in self-medicate, which was strange. It's just static pages in var or whatever that Nginx will serve.
Yeah, but
So can we translate that with kind of? I know how to do that with PHP, for instance, or Python, but is it worth it or?
I think we're thinking about this the wrong way. So it's not actually a static site. There's a lot of dynamic stuff that happens on the front end. It's just it happens in JavaScript. So the question is if there are English words baked in, if there are English sentences baked into the HTML code, the exercise isn't to create a separate version of Antidote Web that is French, for instance. That's not the correct way of thinking about it. The right way of thinking about it is if there are English words in the HTML code anywhere, those need to be moved into Antidote internationalizations, as it needs to be an internationalization string.
Okay, so everything is dynamic and served by some kind of JavaScript execution?
Served by a what, I'm sorry?
When I see the learn automation by doing it phrase.
Yeah.
This H2, whatever it is. How does it come to my browser? Is it served directly by Nginx, or is it some JavaScript that executed?
I'm going to look at it real quick, that specific example. The page itself is served by, oh geez, GitHub is down.
Oh my God, GitHub is down.
Let me look at my local repository.
Because it seems to me it's
yeah. So this is static right now. That text is static. The site is not a static site. There's plenty that happens that's dynamic, but that particular text is statically described in the HTML code.
Okay.
If you look, for instance, at the labs portion, so you're looking at index.html right now, I assume. So look at like labs, and then underneath labs, look at. Oh, that's not a good example. Let me find a better example.
Catalog?
Catalog, maybe. I'm just wondering if there are really any internationalization callouts here. There may not be, because a lot of these are in Antidote UI components. The HTML that's in Antidote Web is actually very minimal. There's not meant to be much in there. Most of the dynamicism is generated by Antidote UI components.
Yeah, but I wondered how far I would say this was used. If the whole page could be made dynamic, or if it was just the dynamic parts, like making a query, in the database of lessons and stuff like that, which obviously is dynamic because you have to post.
It is. The difference here is that none of that takes place in Antidote Web anymore. So this was part of the relaunch that we did earlier in the year.
Yeah. Cool.
So the site is still extremely dynamic. The difference here is that all of that dynamic behavior is now no longer in the Antidote Web repository. It is in the Antidote UI components repository.
Yeah. Where we have the translation, as you showed us.
That's a different repository. Actually, but if you're in Antidote Web, the best place to look at is look at the source directory, src, and then look at package.json.
Mm-hmm.
So in that, you'll see it's a big JSON blob. You'll see the key that says dependencies. And then underneath dependencies, you'll see 3 repositories. There's Antidote localizations, there's Antidote UI components, and then there's NRE styles.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the 3 sub-projects that make up Antidote Web. Those were broken out as part of the relaunch effort.
Yeah.
So Antidote UI components is where all of the dynamic behavior is. So all of the actual front-end application logic, that's there.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see it throughout that code base. There are many call-outs to internationalization strings.
And in the UI components, there is a part for just displaying a regular paragraph or H1 or H2 text. Or it's just widgets?
I'm not sure what you mean.
In the HTML page, what I'm seeing is a H1 header, H2 header, or paragraph, or stuff like that. So does UI components cover such mostly static but translatable phrases, paragraphs?
It covers whatever you want. It covers whatever there are web components for.
Okay, yeah.
So the difference here, I think, is that main index.html file was not built as a web component. That part was not built as a web.
Yeah, so that
yeah. So
is it visible or not?
So I mean that's something to look into is figuring out how to represent that chunk of text within Antidote UI components, just like any of the other pages. I can't imagine that it's not possible. It has to be possible. It just hasn't been done yet.
So in the end, I'm not sure that's really needed to have a French variant of the whole site because maybe people don't care. But it was just my questioning at the time. So.
That's fine. I understand. The difference here is that it is actually a very dynamic site. But the question here isn't that we need to create like a separate French version of Antidote Web. The question is, how can we bring the dynamicism that's currently in Antidote UI components to the parts that maybe it hasn't touched yet? And then, of course, like I said, Antidote localizations, that's just a list of strings that we currently have.
Yeah, so I saw that and it was quite obvious how to translate that.
Yeah, I would expect that there are still plenty of places that don't have localization strings. And if we do tackle how to componentize like the front page, for instance, then we'll just keep adding strings as we need, even to the English translation, because they don't exist in general, never mind for other languages. So that I think that might be a two-part exercise.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
One thing I wanted to mention, I actually lied earlier. The preview service actually worked fine. Like I said, it was a Travis failure. So one of the checks passed. In fact, the important check passed. And I'm pretty sure that this one failed because of the GitHub outage that's happening right now. But fortunately, GitHub is working well enough to have generated this comment for me. So if you click on this, you can see the subdomain that's provisioned here, preview dot so and so, VBRQ, whatever. Yeah, this is effectively what you would see. So the idea is you go to find lesson content, and then you go to the lesson that you're working on. It doesn't know which lesson you're working on. I didn't think that was useful. So the step for looking at the preview is if you wanted to preview a piece of content that you're working on, you got to go to the catalog and go to the lesson yourself. Maybe you're working on multiple lessons. I'm not going to try to figure out which one you're working on. And then, yeah, there you go. This is the new lesson. So this is the preview service working in action. Like I said, I'm going to continue to refine it, figure out if there's anything I can do to make it more reliable and resilient. But yeah, I'm excited about that. We had a lot going on.
Really exciting.
A lot going on. All right. Anybody have anything else?
No.
Going once, going twice. Sold. Okay. It is the top of the hour. Thanks for everybody. Thanks for everybody for spending the hour with us. And we'll talk to you next week. Thanks for everybody for joining. Thanks for the work that you guys are putting in.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.